probably easier for me if I record as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
In which case you need to give me some physical permission. I think you need to make me co-host or something.
He's been on for 2 minutes and he's co-host already.
Yeah, sorry. Presumptuous or what?
Describe Team Rich, who are like the one or two people that have shaped you.
Oh, crumbs!
You read the discussion guide, right? It was in there.
No,
it wasn't.
No, it's sometimes best not to.
Hi, John.
Hi, Amelia. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I thought I was all sorted for this morning. And then I had a phone call from one of my sons who's at a sleepover to say, can I pick him up? And it was like, yes, I can pick you up now or not at all. So I had to fly out to the house. So as usual with me, the best laid plans have all gone
Yeah.
So yes, I'm probably still sweating and panicky, but I'm here. That's the main thing.
Made it. That's the main thing.
You doing all right?
It's the end of the summer. Everything's all over the place. People are trying to get in as many plans as they can before everything goes back to normal.
Yeah,
it happens.
Yeah. I can't blame them for that. We a few of us guys from church went out for a curry last night again, just to try, because one of them's a teacher, so he's especially trying to make the most of these last few days of the summer. So yeah,
it's kind of like what we were talking about at the end of the episode we just recorded, little sneak peek of how we try to control and like have all our plans together, but when we make plans, God laughs. Even when you make a plan to record a podcast episode.
He's got other plans. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
So speaking of the podcast, would you like to introduce the guest we have on this week?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously one of the big challenges for all of us in churches throughout lockdown has been navigating the online world in some capacity, and people have done it to varying degrees and in varying ways, but it's been amazing actually. And in a weird way, if I'm allowed to be proud of the church, I'm really proud of the way that people have been stepping up in different ways, and not just online, I know, but perhaps especially that's been a key theme. So today we're going to think about online church, and got a good friend of mine, Richard Hardy, who's going to come share, who was part of our church while he was working for Care for the Family, and then from out of that he grew a sort of a charity called the Entheos Trust, which looks to support churches in mission. He's also pastor of Albany Road Baptist Church here in Cardiff, and he was doing a lot of online content way before lockdown, and that's only grown during lockdown. And so I thought he'd be really interesting to talk to, and I'm kind of interested to see how you guys sort of bounce off each other, because you've sort of had a lot to do with online church with Prince Zion, and another hat you're wearing is sort of the online marketing world. So I think it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a world that like we've all been thrown into, whether you wanted to or not. But I think it's going to be really interesting, and it's also always good to see how the approach other churches have taken, whether they're doing YouTube or live streams or Zoom. There's so many different ways that you can do church online now. So I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, awesome. I'm just hoping another one of my kids doesn't ring halfway through to ask for a lift somewhere. So we'll see how that goes. Hi there, Rich. It's great to have you with us.
Great to be with you. Really good.
Have you had a tidy up this morning, or does your lounge always look that clean?
I've moved the ironing board from behind me. Because actually, that won't affect you on podcast at all. It's not likely to sort of grate across the floor at any time soon. But actually, for those who are going to see it visually, then it looks a bit neater, doesn't it? So.
It does. It looks like one of those backgrounds you can put on, doesn't it? I have to say.
Yeah.
Except
you could be sitting on a beach
this.
in the Bahamas.
You can do this online.
Amelia, you've decided to show your books to show how clever you are as well, so that's good in the background there.
Yeah, I'm just a wealth of knowledge. No.
It's an interesting lampshade. I quite like the lampshade.
Are there interesting lampshades? I don't know if there are.
No, maybe eye-catching.
There's been very few lampshades.
Yeah, it's catching my eye, definitely.
Yeah.
There's no museum, is there, of interesting lampshades? I don't. Yeah.
No.
Anyway.
Maybe that's an area we're missing out on.
Yeah, there's probably a mission field, right? Anyway, sorry. That's not what we're here to talk about. So, Rich, the first question that we like to ask everyone that comes on Team Talk is to do with your team. If you had to describe Team Rich, like one or two people that really support you or inspire you or shape you, who's Team Rich, do you reckon, for you?
In lots of ways, I guess Team Rich is anybody that I can lay my hands on, if the truth be known. And you know, I'm just one of those people. I find people absolutely fascinating. So, you know, and it's wonderful to be able to pull out from people the things that they know, because then you learn, don't you? So there's an element of truth in that. I've always felt that people are the most important thing on the planet, and some people will dispute that and disagree with that, but that's me. But having said that, I mean, I guess family comes to the very fore, doesn't it? You know, I mean, I guess every guest says, you know, my wife or my spouse or, you know, my partner or whatever. And then I would love to say my kids, but actually they've been eclipsed by my grandchildren. And they probably are sort of, my kids are now lower down the pecking order, but don't tell them, because I don't think they know.
You don't say that publicly.
Yeah. Then in terms of the other stuff I do, you know, I've got some trustees in terms of the charity who are fantastic and really supportive. And then I've got a whole bunch of elders and deacons that I just couldn't live without, to be honest with you. They are absolutely brilliant. And I realize that not every minister, Baptist minister, can actually say that. So I am greatly blessed.
I mean, not every guest we've had on has said your wife or your spouse, but that is. But I think that's really true of you, Rich. That you do. You're drawn to people, and you know. Richard was part of our and the family, part of our church for a long time.
I was a church member.
Yeah. You said that with great joy. A church.
I caused trouble. Oh, I didn't. No, I didn't. But it was fun. I have to say, it was fun.
But it was definitely something that I appreciated about when we spoke was, just you're really keen to know people. I think that's really true about you.
That's probably why you have so many people on your team.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'd love to tell you that, you know, my magnetic personality has attracted thousands to the church I serve, but that wouldn't be the case. Somebody once said I'm a bit like the grit in an oyster. You know, who wants to be the grit? You know, I want to be the oyster or I want to be the pearl. But no, they are absolutely right. I am the grit. I am the irritant that makes other people beautiful.
And there's a mission statement. Wow.
Yeah.
But at least the grit is doing something. I mean, the pearl is just sat there. So,
yeah. And if that's not your slogan, I think it should be now.
Richard Hardy, the grit in your oyster. Absolutely. Awesome.
It's what God's cursed me with and blessed me with, I guess.
So one of the things we were keen to explore today is the whole sort of world of online church and this brave new world that we've been thrust into for better or worse, and probably both in many ways. And I think we've spoken a lot throughout this season about the difference between on site and online. And I think one of the things that we fell into quite early, and I think it's probably something that a lot of churches did, was there was an urgent need to replace Sunday mornings. You know, it was a big, what are we going to do if we can't meet in person? But of course, the world of online communication is far broader, and the opportunities are far bigger than just that one gathering. So what do you think are some of the major differences between the two worlds, and as they overlap, what have been some of the fun challenges that you've come across?
To be honest, it's all been fun. You know, I mean, people, you mentioned in what you just said, this brave new world, you know, And I see it like that. I see it as something incredibly positive, and partly that's born out of my experience of what lockdown has been like, which I haven't actually found. I mean, it's had its moments, but generally I've found it not too stressful. But then again, God has been very good to us in terms of preserving life. So I've not been in many people's situations and grieve for them deeply. But it's been fun. It's been an opportunity to learn something new. It's been an opportunity to reach out. And I was interested that you said, we had to replace the morning service. And I think that's a fundamental word, because what many churches did was try to replicate Sunday morning service and found that it didn't work. And fortunately, I've been doing sort of online stuff for a while. And so I knew that what we were going to have to do was to replace, to do something different, to do something new. And I think the thing that surprised me with great joy is just how intimate Zoom has been for us. We chose not to do live streaming. We chose not to do something pre-recorded on YouTube or whatever. We chose to go straight to Zoom and educate the congregation broadly into how to use it. So in the first week or so of the first lockdown, we were not physically, but we were literally running around teaching people how to use and get onto Zoom. And the beauty of it has been, you see everybody's face. When you sit in church on site, and I've deliberately avoided using in person, because online and on site are both in person. It's just we're not in the same room, and that's a distinct difference, isn't it? But it doesn't make it any less personal, which is what often people think. But the thing that's been really interesting is because you can see everybody, and we've been able to do through the keyhole, really, we've been able to see a bit of their house and therefore a bit of their personality. It's changed the dynamic of the way that we are church. It's become more informal. It's become more relaxed because people are more relaxed in their homes. It's become more intimate because you're looking into the whites of their eyes. When we do communion online, we're looking at each other. Whereas when we do communion in what is a traditional sanctuary, worship space in the church, and we've got regimented pews, all you see is the back of most people's heads. And that's been massive. In fact, we're taking that from online back into on-site, because we have learned something that will enrich our experience of one another face to face. And that's just morning services. That's just, we've and the other thing, I guess, that's been really helpful is experimentation. One of the things I've learned is there is no experience without experiment. There's a real soundbite for you. There's no experience without experiment. And it's encouraged us in the church I serve and in my life to experiment, to take risks, to do things different. And my fear is that we will lose that going back into on-site. So, hey, there you go. That's chucked out a lot of stuff, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Rich, because we've used Zoom, or a lot of our small groups have used Zoom. And I was talking to a couple just yesterday that said they feared the impersonal nature of it. For many of us, Zoom was just a speed limit, wasn't it? What on earth is Zoom? And then suddenly now it's like something that we use on a weekly, if not daily basis. But they feared that it would be beyond them, or that even if they could get on it, it'd be impersonal. And they said the odd thing now is they've had more people meeting on Zoom throughout lockdown than we're meeting in someone's house, and that they feel closer to each other. And so it's been the opposite experience of what they feared. And I think you're right that seeing into somebody's home is already more intimate than the sort of, you've chosen what to wear, like you've had the ironing board out, you're presenting something, aren't you? And so how you interact at home, and the early church knew this, didn't they? They deliberately met in each other's homes.
Yeah, it was classic. When we first started, we had a lady that decided during the message, which actually at the time I pre-recorded the messages, because I didn't really know what I was doing. Now I do them live because it's so much more natural to me to do that. But she was ironing in the background. She got out of her chair, and during the message she ironed. And I suddenly realized that that's how she concentrated. It wasn't that she was, this is boring, and the following week she dusted. So I'm watching her dust whilst she's listening to the sermon. And you think she would never have got up in church and pulled out the ironing board and started ironing in the back of the congregation. So it's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. But I don't think it negates the importance of on site, because there is a glass ceiling, particularly in terms of what we've learned, where Zoom is concerned. I guess there's a glass ceiling in terms of in person, because on site. On site, the shy become retiring. Online, the shy are sitting in their own room. And they've got nobody in the room with them, and therefore they are much more likely to speak out. They're much more likely to share on Zoom than they would on site. And that's been a real revelation. But similarly, we've started exploring, in the last 18 months, we've seen the church start the journey through renewal. So we are seeing people healed on Zoom. We are seeing people converted on Zoom. We're seeing those things happen. And it's the freedom and the elbow room that Zoom has given them, and I'm wondering what that's going to look like when we go back on site. And are trying to work that out. But we've reached a glass ceiling where my ability to help people to move on in that sense of the things of the Spirit is limited by the little box. And on site is going to help us to move that forward. So what's happening effectively, I think, is that we are branching off. I am not trying to take what we do on Zoom online and translate it literally back into on-site, because they are very different genres. They're very different medium. And whilst the medium is not the message, the medium should dictate. It's contextual, isn't it? It's about contextualization. And therefore, we've chosen, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, it's just what we've chosen to do. The morning service will not be live streamed. It will remain in the room, because it's the only way I can make it interactive and informal. Because the problem from my perspective with live stream is it becomes very platform orientated, unless you've got thousands to chuck at cameras looking in all sorts of directions. And then you've got protection issues that you've got to get over and all sorts of stuff. So we've chosen not to do that. We're keeping the two separate, and we're developing an on-site church and an online church.
Yeah, I loved what you said about the shy becoming more confident over Zoom. And that's definitely something I experienced as well. If I was leading like small groups on Zoom, the people who would not really share in person, suddenly you saw them in like the comfort of their room or their own home. And yeah, there was just a different, not that they looked completely different, but you could tell there was something different, and they felt a lot more comfortable to share. And you know, sometimes you get the awkward thing on Zoom where like two people go to talk at the same time, and then it's like, oh, do I do it again? But yeah, there was definitely a shift in that someone who would never speak in a group context suddenly felt so much more comfortable to share or to pray or just to speak out. And I think that was a really important shift that maybe wouldn't have happened for a certain amount of time if we were still in person. And yeah, if we look back to lockdown, I think morning services or just church online kind of seemed like a limitation at first, but actually, like you said, it was a new opportunity. It's an opportunity to do something new and kind of take away the four walls of the building. Because when you put church online, when you put what we do within the church online, you can't shut the door on it. You don't know who's watching. You don't know who's taking it in. You take away the building, and that's probably been a really good thing over the last 18 months, because church is never about the building or where you do it. So suddenly we've been able to take away that structure. And I think it's really interesting what you've decided to do now with not keeping them separate, but having an on-site church and then online. How do you think, even though you keep them separate, how do you think they work together going forward?
Now that's really interesting, because whilst I say we're keeping them separate, there are elements that are going to be separate. But one of the things I realized is that I don't have the time to run one church, let alone 2 churches to the way I would want to. So what we've effectively done is, I mean, the only way to describe it really is sort of 3 interlocking circles, sort of laid out horizontally. So there's the on-site church, and there will be things that we will only do physically. So there'll be physical projects, or there'll be physical courses that happen during the week, and the stuff that we were doing before the first lockdown. That stuff will continue, though I have to say we've reviewed everything that we do, and we've ditched some stuff, we've refined some stuff, and we've kept some stuff. And we did that in the first 2 lockdowns, I think, in that phase of the situation we were in. And then there's going to be this online pre-recorded YouTube. We have a public Facebook group that has 350 people on it that are not part of the church physical. They are part of something, well, we don't know what they're a part of at the moment, because we didn't even realize they were there, to be honest with you, before the first lockdown. And so we're offering this pre-recorded service with opportunity for chat in the chat box, etc. We're offering that on a Sunday evening, but it will go out and it will be there in the ether for anybody to watch. But we recognize that what we're not trying to do is to build, in one sense, 2 churches. We're looking to do 2 congregations. So we've got this middle circle that overlaps the other 2. And the middle circle contains the other stuff that we're going to be doing on Zoom, for example. So the online church, we will invite to come to the deep dive Bible study that happens on Zoom. But we will also invite the physical congregation to come to that as well. And so suddenly we've got an overlap of the 2 and an interaction and interrelationship between the 2. And I guess the most important thing where that is concerned, and the place where the online church I'm going to invite into something physical, if they live within our area and would like to, is to invite them to participate in community projects. So those things that will engage with the community, those things that will give them expression for service, but not inside the confines of a building, which I totally agree with you, Amelia. I've not thought of it, but you are totally right. To see the walls come tumbling down, you know, is worth marching around for, 7 times a day for 7 days, to be honest with you. So that's been really helpful. And so we've got a number of projects. We've got something called Hope in Mental Health, which supports one of the mental health wards in Landock here in Cardiff. And it provides basic necessities to people who come in. Sometimes people come into a mental ward stark naked. They do not have the clothes they walked in with. And they don't have things like, sanitary wear. They don't have toothbrushes. They don't have shower soap. So we put these little pouches together, and we've built a relationship with one of the wards. And we will advertise that project online and invite people to participate. We're opening a new wellbeing cafe, and we will invite people to participate in that. We're doing lots of projects, and therefore we're creating a link that is through service, so that if people choose to go from online into on-site, and that's entirely up to them as to whether they ever do that or not, they will be coming through, hopefully through the portal of service, and therefore the quality of their commitment is stepped up. That's our thinking.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you think of all the issues that surround mental health at the moment, even to like the everyday struggles of things like anxiety and stuff like that. I think having church online has been really beneficial for those people who struggle with things like social anxiety, because they haven't had to step into a crowded room. They could just go on their phone or go on their laptop or TV, wherever it may be, and suddenly they're part of a service that they might not have been able to step into because of what they struggle with. So I think it's been really beneficial for people like that. Even if I put myself in lockdown 3 years ago, where I was quite an anxious person, I think being able to watch something, maybe if I was to watch it before I make the commitment to step in to in-person, that probably would have really helped me a lot. And yeah, I think keeping that going now over the next few months, like you said, with his where they kind of come together in sight and online, it kind of builds that online community, but to the point where they're not separate, but kind of that hopefully would build like that comfortable feeling of, I attend the online services, but I know there's a community that like, no, I'm here and who value me, and I can step into these projects, and suddenly they're a part of something a lot bigger than just watching a video online.
And the beauty, of course, is that the transitions, the little steps, and I'm great for, one of the things that we tend to do in church is go, come to our service, and the step from outside. I mean, I remember a lady once, and she walked past our church 13 times on a Sunday, 13 weeks in a row before she got the courage to come in.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge step. Whereas online is brilliant because you can, the beauty of what you do in terms of podcasting is that you can podcast something and just listen to it in the background in your car or whatever. And then you think, oh, I found that quite interesting. I might see what they're doing on in terms of YouTube. And then they go and they watch it. And then they come to Zoom, which we've had experience of, and they don't put their camera on. They just listen until they feel confident enough to turn their camera on, but they're in control all the way through the process. And they know what they're doing. And as you say, so rightly say, their surroundings are always familiar. It's why we hadn't thought about it before, goodness only knows. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the walls coming down has been about accessibility for people. But it's also been about everyone sort of coming to a Zoom or to a YouTube. It's kind of, because you don't know, the participation is sort of self-led, and so everyone's kind of on the same level. Rather, it's different than being in a church where you either know the songs or you don't, or you either know when to stand up or go forward or you don't. The expectation is far more open. I was interested in what you're saying earlier, Richard, about this sort of period of renewal that you've been led into, that those walls have come down as well, because it's kind of like, when you go somewhere as a minister or as a church leader and you get asked a question, you can sometimes see that look in people's eyes like, yeah, but that's what you meant. That's what you're meant to say. That's what you're meant to think. And there's certain things that are meant to happen in church that can be explained as atmosphere or, hype or whatever. But when they're happening in people's homes and there's just been a time of prayer on Zoom, and you've invited the Holy Spirit to do something, and he has done something. We experienced something very similar at the Alpha Holy Spirit Day that we did on Zoom. It has a very tangible quality to it that is hard to dismiss, and I think those walls are coming down as well, which is really exciting.
Yes, absolutely. And you're so right. It is really helpful, isn't it? And really encouraging to see that God is real. And it isn't about hype. I mean, it's very difficult for you to hype me up in my own sitting room. And particularly when I can go nope, and I can turn you off.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's really helpful. Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, on YouTube, people can leave and make no fuss at all. You don't even know they've gone.
yeah, exactly. Yes, it's just discouraging when you look at the analytics and find they watched 3 seconds.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's another really interesting area that we've been sort of learning about, is that the difference between communicating online and on site has brought other things into sharp focus. And Amelia, I know that throughout lockdown, you've been part-time as a church intern, and a lot of that has been running online church and designing stuff and editing stuff. And then the other half has been working for an online marketing company. And so there's talk about those 3 connected circles, there's been huge overlap, but I'm sure there's things that are very different as well between the world of online marketing and views, analytics, likes, engagement, shares, all that kind of thing. And then the world of ministry, which isn't disconnected from engagement, but it's got very different targets in the kingdom to sort of business and worldly values.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's been a very fine line that I've been walking the last few months and trying to find the balance. So in my job in marketing, I'm a content writer, so I'm not always involved heavily in the analytics of things. But when we have like our meeting every Monday morning or beginning of the week, the first question is like, what are the rankings? Like, how are the clients doing? Like, how are they performing? Has there been any dips? Like, and the aim is always to get higher on the rankings in terms of like Google searches and stuff. And obviously the content I write then has a role in building clients up so they get higher on the rankings. And obviously because I knew how to do that in my job, it kind of directly correlated to what I was doing with church then in terms of social media and church online. And what I try to find a balance of is still putting kind of good quality content out for the church, but also like kind of drawing that line of actually it's not about the analytics, it's not about the numbers. Because I think when you focus on that too much, you come very close to the bums on seats narrative of it's just about getting, we only had 25 views on that one, we normally have 70. How do we get the views back up? And suddenly it's not about the content anymore. It's not about the message, but about the number of people who's watching. And yeah, I think that's quite a tricky line because you want people to watch and engage with what you put on there and on social media, on YouTube or wherever it may be. But it's not actually about that. And it's not about like filling seats or filling views or getting as many people watching as possible. It's about the gospel and the message that we're talking about. And I think that's kind of the pinhead that we're coming to at the moment, where things are kind of getting back to normal. So there's more stuff in person, but you don't want to leave the online and social media stuff because you've just built a platform. So why would you let that go now? And how do they kind of work together, and how does it not become about the numbers, but about just putting that quality content and just spreading the love and word of God, and not become a marketing strategy.
That's really interesting. A couple of years ago, I spoke to somebody and they said to me, because I've been doing this for about 5 years now. I've been putting stuff online personally for that length of time. And they said, you're not broadcasting. You've got to remember this. You are narrowcasting. Now, I'd never heard of narrowcasting. I mean, it's a marketing concept, isn't it, Amelia? That's my understanding anyway. And I went, well, what the heck does that mean? And they said, well, with broadcasting, you're scattering the seed, really. You're looking to get the biggest and widest audience you possibly can. And as I followed people on YouTube, one of the things I've realized is that they cut their message according to the numbers of views. So if they have a YouTube video that gets 1,000 views and they've only been getting 200, they do more of that thing. Yeah. So they're being dictated to by the audience in a way. And I think one of the things I've learned is that you must have a real passion and conviction that you have a message to share. And what you're looking to do is to not build an audience, but build a community. So I have in my mind two things when I do this. One, I'm speaking to one person through a lens, not to 500 people. And therefore it becomes much more about helping them, although I've not perfected that yet. But it's also about, at the moment, I've got an audience, a community on Thought for the Week of about 500 to 700 people that watch on a regular basis. I'm not looking to make that bigger. I'm looking to share what I am learning in order that it might help it's very narrow in terms of its goal. And I think the danger churches have is that they will try and broadcast. I was talking to somebody recently and they had the first week of lockdown, their church went from nobody watching and about 200 people on site to 4,000 people watching globally. And I said, well, what are you doing with that 4,000? Well, we're just trying to keep them. Well, that's exactly what you're saying, Emily. That's the shutdown maintenance mentality that we had on site, just now bigger online. That I don't think is helpful. So I would agree with you totally. It's really helpful.
And I think what you said about it being a fine line is really important, because there's a difference, isn't there, between self-promotion, and that's been a really interesting lesson, is that when you put something out there, number one, for us for a lot of us who are doing this for the first time, or still feel very newbie at all this, it feels very vulnerable. You put it together. It's never quite how you had in your head it all feels, especially if you've been involved in the editing as well, as if it's all been sort of held together with duct tape, and then you put it out there, and it's hard not to take it personally when there isn't a big response, or there isn't a gushing, or whatever it is. Because I think there was a lot of that early in lockdown, when people were just appreciating the fact that there was something where they feared there'd be nothing. But that was never going to be sustained as people got used to it. So it's hard, as you're saying, to recognize that you're looking to minister to one person. And that's true, when you're preaching on site rather than online. You never know where it's landing and how it's landing for people, because that's the work of the Spirit. That's ministry. So that's one thing. But then the other side of that is, there's nothing wrong with being hungry for promoting the gospel and proclaiming the gospel. And so it's not about numbers, but for the sake of the kingdom, we long to see more numbers, but not for my little corner of YouTube, but for the kingdom. And I think there's a line somewhere within that. That there's nothing wrong with being ambitious about the mission of God. I mean, Paul certainly didn't lack ambition for promoting Jesus, but he just seems to constantly downplay himself in all of that, whereas some of the tools that we're using seem to encourage self-promotion and very much personality driven, which can detract from the message.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's the difference between reputation and integrity, isn't it? I mean, reputation is what other people think of you, and there's not a lot you can do about that, to be honest with you. I mean, I remember the first time I had somebody troll me, and I took it so personally. It was horrible.
I was really sorry, Rich. I just got
lost.
I'm sorry at the time, and I'm sorry now.
And it was a horrible experience. And one of the things I learned was that they obviously feel like that because of something. I looked at the material. I thought, actually, the material was good material. So what's going on in their life? And so I started with a mantra: befriend your trolls. And so I went, anybody who makes a comment, I go, thanks ever such a lot for the comment, really appreciate it, looking to learn. So I'm not coming across as somebody that knows it all. I'd be interested to know why you said that. I'd be interested to know what it is that sort of sparked for you. And sometimes you'll get a response. Other times you'll just get the same venom, and there's nothing you can do about that. And to be honest with you, we get it. If you've been in ministry for any length of time and you're a church leader, you've stood at the door of your church and had somebody spew venom at you at least once in your ministry. But it's so much easier online to do that. A couple of times I've actually managed to befriend my troll. So the next time they come on, they go, "Oh, hi! It's really nice to have you back on. I'm sure you've got something really interesting to say." And then. Because they tell you what they think, but I think one of the things that I found really helpful was you cast your bread upon the water, and you let it go. Don't worry about the analytics. Don't worry about where it may end up. Just let it go, because that's up to God at the end of the day. And the thing about reputation is what other people think. Integrity is what you know to be true about you. And I think if we come onto this with a motivation that says, I am here for him, because actually what we want is for them to meet him, because then they'll be impressed. When they meet me, they're going to be disappointed. And I think that helps. I was at a meeting a couple of years ago, and somebody came up to me like I was some sort of star. And they went, oh, it's really nice to meet you. And I went, oh, okay. Have we met before? Oh, yes. I've been watching you for the past year online. And, it's so nice to meet, and I... It was very difficult to take it seriously.
And I think both those encounters are unhealthy, aren't they? Both of them play to provoke a response that is unhealthy at either end of the spectrum. And there is something about resting in what you know to be true of yourself, but also what God says of you and what God has asked you to do. And I think that's got to undergird, you know, we, myself and my colleague Tim, who is an absolute legend with some of the technical stuff and the content stuff online. We were talking a while back about what does success look like in terms of online church? Just as a sort of a gauge, you know, people ask you how the church is going and you go, I don't know. It's just, like, on what level do you want me to answer, you know? But we were saying that really and truly, and again, this is true just generally in ministry, that if you feel you've shared what the Lord has given you to share in the way that you feel he's given you to share it, that's success. And like you say, bread on the water, you know, seed scattered, and he'll do what he does with it, you know. I was wondering, Amelia, when Richard was talking about the trolls, if in the sort of the online marketing world, because the trolls sometimes represent, you know, and they're called trolls for a reason. Nobody wants to be trolled, but they do engage with what you've said. Some don't, and you know, Richie acknowledged sometimes it's just venom, but there can often be a deeper engagement than the people that just go, "Oh, thanks for that was great," and if that's you, please don't stop doing that because we love that as well. But but is there something about when a message has been shared and there is a deeper engagement like that shouldn't necessarily be viewed negatively? I don't know if you've come across that in marketing at all.
I'd say it's kind of different with the marketing that I've been involved with anyway, because they tend to be like clients who offer a service of some sort, whether they're a contractor or like a shop or e-commerce or something like that. So the trolling you'll kind of tend to get is people like complaining about a service or on the stuff that I write, there'll be like spam comments, like they'll just say random, nothing to do with the content that's been written or anything, and it'll just be kind of spamming to try and get links between like our website and then their website. So I think it's more tactical trolling that I've been involved with more than anything. But I think in terms of like the trolling or comments you'd get on like stuff the church puts online, sometimes it is people who have questions and who don't quite know how to ask them, or maybe people who've been like hurt by the church even and still have questions, but don't know how to ask them, and like the only way they know how to engage is to be like, I don't actually agree with what you've just said. But I think that's been another great thing about doing everything online, is that, like you said earlier, Rich, it's been a massive experiment. And you have just had to be vulnerable. I started my internship in September 2020. So basically the whole year, well, I'd say 70% of the year has probably been online. So I think I've spoken to a camera and my phone more than I've spoken to people face to face. And it suddenly dawned on me that actually I'm not just speaking to the congregation that I know here. I'm speaking to my friends and family who don't step into church. I'm speaking to people who I'm friends with on Facebook from 7 years ago that like you befriend when you're 13 on Facebook because that was the cool thing to do. And you're actually speaking to a lot more people than like that congregation that you're used to. So yeah, it's vulnerable. So you will get people who have questions but don't know how to ask them or don't really understand, or and you will get weird comments like that. But actually, like you said, as long as you've spoken the message you think God has given you, then actually it's not a personal attack. I think all the trolling that I've experienced, all the stuff that I've seen, it hasn't been necessarily an attack, but just I have questions that I don't have answers to. And you haven't really answered my question, but you've kind of triggered something inside of me. So I'm just going to be a keyboard warrior for a second. And actually, I think what you done, Richard, and like befriending the trolls is the best way to do it, because, you know, we can't respond with like equal trolling back.
No.
But to just be, again, vulnerable and be like, I'm still learning. I'm not perfect. This is what I believe God has asked me to say on this particular occasion. And we can talk about it. It's not, like I said earlier, we haven't got the four walls. We haven't got the door to shut. So you have to welcome them in. You have to say, well, talk to me about it. And people are, like you said, people are a lot more confident online than they are in person. So they probably will ask the questions. They will do the trolling. But I think it's easy to see it as a negative, but actually, like the past 18 months have been a massive opportunity to just be like refine what we're doing as the church, like not just our churches, but the church globally. It's so easy to get stuck in tradition and to get stuck in, this is how our services run. This is how we've done it for 50, 70 years. I know that this group of people like to sit here in church. Like, we all have like our seat in church. Like we have little traditions like that. And actually we can't do any of that now. So let's take away the walls, take away the big front doors. And actually, how can the church look now? And it's not about completely changing everything, because there are elements of the church that will always work. And they've stayed that way for all these years for a reason. But yeah, now I feel like we can step into a new way of doing church that's more accessible, where we can't shut the door on people, so we have to answer their questions. And yeah, I think it is exciting, and to be able to bring the two together now is, really exciting, I think.
And what you're saying is really, really important. In fact, actually, to be honest with you, I think it's the most important thing that's been said in this entire conversation, because in one sense, the last 18 months has been a laboratory preparing us for what's to come. And we need to recognize that, if we think mental health issues, for example, are a problem now, they are going to be much worse in 5 years' time, because for a number of reasons. One, if you're isolated in your home, you're left with your own thoughts, which is the one thing people sweep under the carpet. They don't want to deal with the bad stuff. And this has forced it to the surface. And they're either going to, they're going to have to do something with it. And so the opportunity for the church to engage with people through these medium that will make it safe for people to get that stuff out, and ways we can address it is huge. Isolation has now been brought into under the microscope, hasn't it? And our opportunity is massive. Debt, massive problem, people losing their jobs, being laid off, etc. Massive opportunity, because it's all been there under the surface, hidden away in our society, and now it's erupted. And if you think austerity a few years ago was difficult, you have no idea what the next 10 to 15 years are going to look like in this country. And we need to, we have been prepared for the opportunity that's going to bring for a message of good news. And so, Amelia, you are bang on the money. This has not been an end in itself. It's a goal. It's a springboard into another world. And I am so glad that there are people like you who are, the next generation coming up, and so grateful that you and Jon have got together to do this. This is so important. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been so good to talk, and I guess in some ways this isn't the kind of topic that's going to go away. It's not the kind of thing that you watch a video on or do a course on and go, oh yeah, that's interesting. We could do a bit of that. The experiment continues, and who knows what
it's called life, Jon. It's called life.
The experiment called life. Yeah.
And faith.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But it's been so good to talk. Thank you so much, Rich. It's been really good to have you.
Yeah. Great to be here.
You've been listening to Team Talk, a new podcast series from the South Wales Baptist Association.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, share and subscribe.
Find us on Facebook, YouTube or Instagram.
And for more information, check out swba.org.uk/Team Talk. Thanks for listening.